Do you have any place in particular where you'd like to go to relax?
Yeah, I think it's usually the beach here. I'll take myself there to try and relax, unwind, and remember that, there's a bigger world out there. I do feel like more and more companies are starting to want to do experimentation. Not all of them obviously have the capacity or the user base to do it, but certainly that mindset is starting to shift. It's not really, I don't think it's really something that is taught. There's not a course you can take. Yes, you can understand the data points you need, but without having the time and the experience and the learnings from the experiments themselves, I feel like it's not, it just doesn't all come together. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like, everyone's making mistakes when they start out, and actually that's exactly what experimentation is about. It's about failing fast and learning from it. Now, a lot of people get bogged down in the debates, the small debate. Bayesian versus frequentist is a big one. Or should it be CRO? Should it be experimentation? Should we call it A/B testing, or should we call it growth? And I think a lot of that, yes, it's important, but at the same time, we're ignoring a lot of the other important conversations.
Welcome to another episode of the Women in CRO series by WeWO Podcast. This series is an ode to the contribution of women in the CRO industry. Before we speak to our special guest for this episode, here's a quick summary of who we are and what we do. WeWO is a leading experience optimization platform that helps fast-growing brands optimize their digital experiences. Using our latest product, WeWO Insights, you can understand user journeys and identify conversion roadblocks on your website and mobile app. So, without any further delay, let's jump right into the conversation.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Akansha, and I'm currently working as an account executive here at WeWO. And before we delve into the podcast, I just want to take a moment of take a moment and express my gratitude to each and everyone who's currently a part of this podcast. Whether you're a new listener or are coming back to us again, I would just like to thank for your time and choosing to spend your time with us. And in today's episode, we have Steph. We're thrilled to have Steph. She is a seasoned consultant at Conversion. She has 8 years of experience in the CRO arena, and she brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to the table. As a CXL certified optimizer, she has honed her skills and made significant contributions to the field. Previously, Steph held roles as CRO and UX manager at Specsavers, further solidifying her reputation as a leader in the industry. Beyond her professional pursuits, Steph has a passion for staying active, and whether she's hitting the gym for some strongman style weightlifting or engaging in high rocks training, Steph is always striving to push her limits and achieve her goals. So join us today as we delve into Steph's journey, exploring her insights, experiences, and the lessons that she's learned along the way. Welcome to the podcast, Steph. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, doing really well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Steph, I recently found out that you like to stay fit and consistent, and that is something that I've been trying to do for such a long time. I think all my New Year's resolution is around the fact that I want to start this journey of fitness and do something. And yet, I think, irrespective of how motivated I am, I think there's a factor of discipline and there's a factor of consistency that matters more than motivation. So, my question to you is, and I'm being a little bit selfish and taking time, sneaking away from it, but how do you remain consistent? So, what motivates you to be disciplined?
That's a good question. A lot of it for me comes down to optimizing my health, which I guess comes with the optimizing nature. But I really like to understand how my body responds to different levels of training, and also see how far you can push it, because there are some people out there that are capable of crazy things, running 7 marathons in 7 days. So when you look at things like that, it kind of makes you think, well, what could I be capable of? So I guess it kind of comes from that place of optimizing my health. And then in terms of discipline, I think it also helps my mental health as well. So it's just there to, keep everything in check. It gives you a moment of peace throughout the day. And also training with friends is really beneficial as well, because you get to catch up with them, have conversations whilst you're working out, and you kind of forget that you're doing that hard work.
And how did you get started? Was this something that you were always passionate about growing up, or is this something that you took up, recently?
Um, I started, I guess, in lockdown. So we came back from traveling, and I'd put on some traveling weight. So I decided I wanted to lose some, and I did Joe Wicks's 90-day body plan,
Hmm.
which was really good, like really motivational. And then I kind of just got this urge to keep doing different challenges. So then I ran a half marathon.
Hmm.
And then I did a certain amount of miles in a month. And then I joined a new gym, and they were doing strongman training. And I felt
Hmm.
like weightlifting was something I liked the idea of, but I wasn't really brave enough to try. The
Hmm.
gym was really overwhelming. So I joined that class, and then it just blossomed from there, to be honest. Like 6 months later, I did my first competition. Then I did another one. And now we're doing high rocks. And after that, we're just going to move into like a hybrid training style. So it
Hmm.
just kind of accelerated year after year. And every year
Hmm.
there's a new fitness target, I guess.
Got it. That just brought back so many memories because I remember following the Chloe Ting workout and I was obsessed obsessed with the workout, but then I guess I just gave up. But so inspiring, Steph. I hope I'm able to uh, do some of that, bring in some discipline and take fitness as a priority because I think 2020 showed us what health would should really mean to us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Yeah.
Anyways, let's quickly jump onto the questions that, we have for you. So how has your approach to starting an experiment changed over the years? Like, are there any myths that you previously used to follow by heart and do you not follow them anymore? So how has that changed in terms of experimenting?
Yeah. I think the biggest change has been the rigor behind the experimentation and where the concepts come from. So I guess if I cast my mind back to when I first started, I was
Hmm.
completely new. I didn't really have a lot of guidance and was just trying to learn on the go. So it was
Hmm.
all ideas from competitors or
Hmm.
best practice things, and you'd just kind of come up with the idea, write
Hmm.
the hypothesis, Whereas now, like fast forward all these years, and the rigor behind the way that we come up with experiments at Conversion is so different. Everything
Yeah.
is research based. And not only that, but we have the lever framework, and then we also have to
Yes.
think about all of the audiences and the areas and an MDE. Looking back, I didn't know what an MDE was at Specsavers. I had no
Hmm.
idea. I was just lucky enough that we had big traffic, so it was all working out fine. Um, but yeah, it was a big learning curve, and I think a lot has changed in terms of backing up the experiments and also then deciding like what the actual execution should be as well. Thinking about, does it fit with the MDE? Could it be better? Why would it lose? All of those things, and putting more rigor behind the actual thing that you're testing as well as the hypothesis.
Of course, of course. I think I absolutely agree with you there, Steph, especially when you mentioned the research part. I think right now, looking at the kind of user base, and since we have so many options, right, for these websites and the kind of places that these users come from, it's absolutely necessary that you base your conversion rate experimentation on data and not just like come up with these ideas. And you mentioned the liver framework, right?
Mhm.
I just wanted to know, like, how do you apply it right now when conducting these A/B tests?
Yeah, sure. So it kind of feeds into almost everything that we do. So when we first start a program, what we'll do is an explorative study. So we'll take, a
Hmm.
number of research methods, and that would include like user testing, competitor analysis, a survey, possibly more as well, depending on kind of the industry. And we'll write down essentially everything we observe from that study. And then each of those observations can come together to group into finding an insight.
Hmm.
Those insights are tagged at a lever level. So
Okay.
everything we then know looks at a lever level. So we can say, right, well, actually, we have 7 observations about direction, 3 about delivery, none about, process flow. And so we can start to look at the beginning of the program where we should focus our efforts. So we can start to cast a wide net, yes, but only look at things that we've validated already with research.
Okay.
That immediately starts to get, that ROI and also those insights and those learnings to then exploit those levers moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
As we gather more information and more research, we'll fold levers away so we know where not to focus. So it really feeds into that whole explore, exploit, fold methodology. And then in terms of, I guess, like past that one view of the experiment program, we have this lever base across every single client we've ever worked with. So what that means is we have 16 years of experiments that are tagged in the same way. So the power of that meta-analysis is huge, because it means we can look at what levers generally are working well, say for fashion in e-commerce. That changed over the years. We see social proof kind of taking a bit of a decline. And we can start to see those industry trends that can also inform our strategy, like overall for that client and for that for those users as well. So yeah, the lever framework feeds into everything that we do, I would say, at Conversion.
Quite interesting. And I recently came across your LinkedIn post where you mentioned that you ran about 100 plus experiments in the year 2023. That's quite a lot. So, how did you do it? And also, did you observe any particular pattern when you were running these tests?
Yeah. When I saw that stat, I was like, wow, that's crazy. I thought I'd work on that many in 1 year, and I'm sure this year it will be more as well.
Of course.
I guess how we do it is I'm really lucky that I have a really supportive team. So we work in a pod structure. There's an associate consultant in my team who's excellent, and she works really well. And then we have QA and developers and designers, and we have a project manager. So together we form like a cohesive team that is well oiled and works, in the best way and is very streamlined. And then, trends I mentioned, like social proof, we've seen kind of the results of adding reviews or talking about Trustpilot that slowly decline over the years, the average uplift that we're seeing. And I think a lot of it comes down to the savviness of the consumer now understanding a bit more about how they can be manipulated online, and not really trusting necessarily everything they read online as well. So if you there's just that 5-star review, perhaps they're a bit more questioning over whether that's true or not. And also a lot around more so around honesty with pricing. So consumers are a lot more savvy around per day pricing being a bit hiding the truth behind things sometimes, or hidden trial offers, that type of thing. So you definitely see that, especially come through in user testing and then in the results as well. Other than that, I'm not sure I noticed many more changes, but I think the social proof one is the most valuable to understand why that's happening, because that will inform a lot of other things that we optimizers generally will go to as a go-to kind of winner as such. We all thought that reviews would hold their truth for a long time, but actually I've seen adding reviews to a website lose, even though they're positive reviews.
Exactly.
Decrease that KPI. So yeah, it's been an interesting learning seeing that unfold.
Wonderful. That's quite interesting to get your point of view, because usually we're on the other side and don't usually have an insight on these kind of things, right? And also I also know that you currently work remotely, which is something that even we do as an organization. So even VW is a remote first company. And oftentimes I fail to have that work-life balance, because I feel that rather than working from home, it's so it feels like it's a never-ending cycle of emails and notification, and irrespective of how many times you put notifications on off, you do know that there's work piled up, and this is exactly where you work. So this is not like a home, but like an office home, right? So how do you find that balance, and how do you also maintain or make sure that you don't lose your focus away from work when you're focusing on things at home? So how do you find that balance, Steph?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in terms of work-life balance, I actually find it's a lot better now I'm agency side, which is interesting, but I think it comes down to the timesheet and the amount of planning that we have. So we plan a specific amount of hours for clients. We know how many more hours we have free in the month, so we can look at project work or things that are outside of that. And I think that that forward planning gives me a better view of what is going to be happening that month. Whereas when I was in-house, I found actually it was a lot worse. I was taking work home a lot, even just thinking about it, dreaming about it. Yeah, it was pretty intense. But that move to forward planning that month has definitely changed my outlook on like productivity as well, because you can literally see like how much you've been doing, which is always really useful. And then I guess balancing that now whilst I'm at home, I think I'm very lucky in that we do have flexible hours. So as long as, we are delivering our work and it's of high quality, and our client hours are being filled and our client needs are being fulfilled, we have flexible Fridays. So I get that work-life balance that day. I make sure, I take my dog Loki for a walk. I'll do like the housework, so I don't have to do it on a Saturday or a Sunday. So me and my partner have more time together. And I think having that Flexi Friday, but then also that flexibility within my hours, allows me to kind of do those things and have work as a separate thing. I think it doesn't work for everyone, but with the timesheet definitely helps as well, because you just can stop and start just as you would.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff, especially as women. It gets a bit tricky because you do want to prioritize both of these aspects, right?
Yeah.
Got it. That tech industry in general, even conversion rate optimization industry, is a male-dominated sector, right? As much as we hate to avoid that conversation, at the end of the day, it is male-dominated. In today's world, if you interview with a tech company, 3 out of 4 people who will be interviewing you will be a male, right? So how do you tackle these challenges? Because I certainly have faced it. Making sure that my voices are heard, or making sure that my work is seen. So how do you tackle these sort of challenges, Steph?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I don't think I've ever noticed it in black and white. It's always a subtle message, isn't it, that you're receiving?
Exactly.
I guess generally with optimization, you're quite lucky in that what you're saying is usually backed by quite a lot of data. So I think I'm always conscious of spelling that out in a very easy to understand way, with slides or however they like to communicate, but also ensuring that I have some authority behind my tone. Quite aware of how I communicate, I think, with different people, not necessarily just male or female, but of different, positions perhaps, or perhaps they need different pieces of information. Some people crave the detail and others just want a short, sharp answer. So I think keeping that in mind and changing my communication style has really helped. Certainly I learned that when I was in-house and trying to speak to, directors or people that were higher up and talk to them about test results and, explain stat sig and really try and go into the detail, and you could see, the glaze come over their eyes. And what I really wanted to know was, what money has that made us? And ultimately, finding out how people communicate has really helped do that, I guess. Yeah, I think other than that, I think you just have to put your voice out there. And I know it is scary, and you do worry about being shut down, or, even if you're a little bit too overexcited, sometimes you're emotional or something like that. And you just have to try and educate as much as you can with people, and also just try and push through those boundaries. It's really difficult, but I think finding women in experimentation can really help. There's a massive Slack channel now that Lucia started, and that support is there, and women are starting to really be heard in the space, and I think that's a really positive change to see.
I like that there are now a lot of safe spaces where women in conversion rate optimization, or even tech in general, can come together to share their experiences, the challenges, and make sure that their voices are heard, right? To someone who's just a newcomer who'd like to be established in the industry, in a way that you have, Steph, what would be your suggestions to them? Like someone who's fresh out of college, with zero professional experience, right? So what would be your suggestions to them?
I think the first thing to do would be to just be an absolute sponge when it comes to soaking in experimentation information, really trying to study, reading articles, keeping up with trends, looking at the, the industry leaders, looking at the likes of Spotify, of Netflix, understanding how they built that experimentation program. And then number two would have been, I think, find a mentor that you can really trust and ask those questions to. If you're afraid of posting on LinkedIn or going to a Slack channel and saying, I don't understand this, then at least if you have a mentor and it's one-to-one, then it's out of the public eye, and at least you won't be afraid to ask those questions. I think that can be really valuable, and certainly I had a mentor at Specsavers, and he was really, really helpful in helping me understand strategy a bit further and trying to hone that skill. But the Slack channels are really useful. Often I'll post in there asking different questions or answering some people as well if I can. But yeah, reaching out to people is probably the best thing. And if you're not sure, not ready to do that, then a mentor is definitely worth a go.
Got it. Anybody in specific that you look up to in this field, Steph? Like someone who, motivated you to become a better version of the professional version that you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think quite early on, I guess, in my career, I spoke to Tracy Lanjaro. I'm going to butcher her last name. And she interviewed me for Experiment Nation's podcast. And the questions that she was asking me really were thought-provoking. And I remember one of them was frequentist versus Bayesian. And I remember reading that question and going, what is she talking about? And I had to read up to understand how to answer that question and what the difference was, because I was using frequentist, but I hadn't even heard of Bayesian. And that just showed how early on in my journey I was. And actually she was able to help me explore that. And she, I think, has been really influential in sharing her knowledge on LinkedIn and being really open with people about, her career and how she's got to where she is. So she's really inspirational to me. And then the other person I think that I met along the way when we were in a pitch process at Specsavers is David Mannheim, who used to be at Brain Labs, and he's now written The Person in Personalization. I think the way that he's built his career and the way he thinks about experimentation, but now also personalization, is really inspiring. And he was just really nice, helpful guy. He would chat to me on LinkedIn. I'd ask him questions. He was always there to be, asked those questions too, and really helped with some career guidance for me as well when I was looking at agency versus in-house, and having those people there that kind of been through it was just really useful. Both of them. Definitely would recommend giving them a follow.
Wonderful. One thing that stood out to me, Steph, was when you mentioned Bayesian versus frequentist. So what's the one thing that differentiates these, in a very simple layman way? Can you please explain it to me? Because I'm still a little confused, because we at VW use the Bayesian model.
So I guess the way that I now try to think about it is that Bayesian uses priors, so the prior knowledge. So I think imagine in VW the tests kind of feed into the other experiments that are live, whereas frequentist doesn't. So you're always just looking at your MDE, your sample size, and then your stopping protocol. So whether that's 90%, 95% stat sig or 80% power. And the runtime that you're calculating, and then you're looking to detect that uplift. So that's the kind of difference. I prefer frequentist because I feel like I understand it much more in black and white. I do use both, but I think I have more confidence in frequentist. And it's really hard. You're not a statistician like all of us. Experimentation, I imagine there are some that have deep knowledge of the stats, and that is amazing, but trying to read these statistical papers when you haven't really studied that before is really difficult to do. So I know that you guys have a few blog articles about it, and I know Optimizely does, and the sequential tool that Borgie has. Those are all really useful to look at to try to understand them. But yeah, it is difficult, and a lot of the time with Bayesian, people have different opinions as well about, particularly around sample size, whether or not it matters. That seems to be in question quite a lot.
A lot.
Yeah, so I think it's a difficult one, I feel like frequency is a lot more black and white, and I like the way that works. So I use that if I can.
Got it, got it. How do you think, the experimentation space will change over the next few years? Do you see some, sort of like an evolution happening in terms of conversion rate optimization, or do you see like the changes will be gradual? It has been, in the past. I mean, Google optimized Sunset was a huge deal, right? So
Yeah.
do you think something like that will sort of change anything in the future?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I do feel like more and more companies are starting to want to do experimentation. Not all of them obviously have the capacity or the user base to do it, but certainly that mindset is starting to shift. And I think that is going to be really valuable for the industry, because ultimately, yes, you can run A/B tests, but also we all talk about the fact that experimentation is a mindset, and it's a valuable business mindset to have, right? You don't know what is going to work, so you should try to test it. And I think having more companies want to do experimentation is going to help that narrative. And at the same time, I think we see, everyone's talking about AI, but we're starting to see how it's changing things for us at Conversion as well. And I'm really excited to see how that unfolds and how far we as an industry are going to take it, because one of the things I wrote about in a recent LinkedIn post is, if we let AI become too close to the experiments and take over too much, we kind of remove the humanity of it. And realistically, when you're, listening to a user test, or you're watching one, or you're taking one, a moderated one, it's listening to people's voices and understanding their emotion on their face, as well as watching their actions. And I always wonder how much AI can understand human emotion and actually put it in observations to get the true meaning of that insight. So yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how that unfolds, and I expect a lot of changes to happen in the next kind of 5 years with that. The digital age moves at speed. We all know that. So yeah, I think a lot will change in the next 5 for sure.
Understandable. And as a consultant, Steph, do you rely on a single tool for all your experimentation requirements, such as analytics, or or do you like to use a mix of different tools?
Yes, it's a mix. So for the experimentation tool itself, then we tend to use what the client has, because they usually have already purchased them, so we learn to use them, and we make sure that we can understand the stats model. And then in terms of housing the experiments themselves and the insights, the observations, all the taxonomy that we talk about with the levers, that's in Airtable for us, and that has become really powerful. If you look at any experimentation on scale, it's fed by something like Airtable, where you have a clear taxonomy for every experiment. There's a clear number, a hypothesis, the execution, the risk profile, the build size, all of those things, the outcome. And that can really help improve the strategy. It's not just us that have it. We use the lever framework for a lot of things, but I know Spotify have their own that they've built out, and that taxonomy sits across their entire experimentation base. And I'm sure there are multiple other companies that have it. So I think having that in Airtable, that's a really good tool. Other than that, I wouldn't say there's any more that are specific to what we do. We tend to be tool agnostic, where we try to use anything that the client has, essentially.
Got it. Well, moving away from conversion rate optimization related questions, I do have a very interesting one for you, Steph. So what is that one advice that you would give to your younger selves?
That's a good question as well. I've thought about this a few times over the years. I feel like it would need to be something about experimentation strategy, because it's not really, I don't think it's really something that is taught. There's not a course you can take. Yes, you can understand the data points you need, but without having the time and the experience and the learnings from the experiments themselves, I feel like it's not, it just doesn't all come together. You can't just do a day course and learn experimentation strategy. So I think it would be something around just trying to take your time with that. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like, everyone's making mistakes when they start out, and actually that's exactly what experimentation is about. It's about failing fast and learning from it. So I think it would be something along those lines of just take the pressure off and try to enjoy learning whilst you can, sort of thing.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think all of that resonates with me as well. I think starting out in the SaaS industry, I had no idea about how conversion rate optimization works. I was completely new to this. And looking back, all I can say is that I'm super grateful for the journey that I've had so far. And there's only so much to learn, especially like, when you're using a tool, an experimentation tool, there's something new that you learn every day. There's an amazing fact that you get to know about every day. So yeah, I think it's great that way. Anyways, do you have any travel plans coming up, Steph?
I do, actually. I'm going to Copenhagen in 30 days to compete at Hyrox. So
Oh my God, that's amazing.
it should be good. We're excited. I compete with my friend, and we did London in November, and now we're training for Copenhagen, hoping for a sub 1:30 time. So
Wonderful.
we'll see. Yeah.
All the very best with that, Steph. And how many hours of practice do you get in a day? Or is it not like
Oh God. We train 3 or 4 times a week, and every session is 1 hour to 2 hours. So yes, it's pretty intense right now. Right now we're really ramping up because it's only a few weeks out. So next weekend we'll run a full Hyrox simulation in our gym to see what time we'll get, and that will hopefully set the tone for the day, because we're very worried that all this training won't result in 30 and we'll be disappointed. But yeah, we'll see after that. I'm sure it'll be fine.
I'm sure that you'll achieve anything that you set your eyes to, Steph. Do you have any place in particular where you'd like to go to relax, maybe a destination, like, spot that you usually go to de-stress?
Yeah, I think it's usually the beach here. So we're really lucky that the whole of Guernsey is surrounded by beaches. And particularly this time of year, the dog can come on them with me. So even a windy walk, just connecting with nature anywhere really, but particularly the beach. I can see the sea. I find it really calming. I'll take myself there to try and relax, unwind, and remember that, there's a bigger world out there than just the worries that are in my brain.
Of course. There was a particular Instagram reel that got viral, which basically said, like, anything that you're worried about, remember that this is like a floating rock that you're living in. And literally, like, anything that you're worried about doesn't even matter, right?
Yeah.
But good to know that you're surrounded by beaches. As someone who grew up in a landlocked country, so I was actually born and brought up in Nepal, full of mountains, like no beaches whatsoever. I absolutely love going to the beach. Even the place where I'm currently at, Delhi, does not have any beach in particular. I think that's the only issue I have with the city. But yeah, I hope you take a relaxing beach walk very soon. But all the best with the training and also the competition.
Thank you very much.
Right. Well, this has been great, Steph. I do have a surprise for you. We have a bunch of rapid fire questions, and you don't have time to think about it. So you'll just get like a couple of seconds. And yeah, are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, wonderful. 3 apps you cannot live without.
Oh, Instagram, Garmin, and maybe Pinterest.
Oh yes, I love Pinterest, so I second you there. If a movie was made about your life, what would the title be?
Ooh, Guernsey Girl.
That's an interesting one.
Guernsey, I'm sure.
That's an interesting one. One thing that you'd like to change about the CRO industry?
Now, a lot of people get bogged down in the debates, the small debates that don't necessarily change or educate that much. Bayesian versus frequentist is a big one. Or should it be CRO? Should it be experimentation? Should we call it A/B testing, or should we call it growth? And I think a lot of that, yes, it's important, but at the same time, we're ignoring a lot of the other important conversations, and it gets repeated over and over.
Mhm. Interesting. What's the most random fact you know by heart?
Guernsey's 26.2 miles round. You can run a marathon around it. I guess.
Nice. Your guilty pleasure TV show or a movie?
Oh, this Grey's Anatomy is the TV show. I've watched it 3 times through, which is awful.
I've tried watching it, but it's just that there's so many seasons, and I'm afraid that I will never be able to catch up with it. So I just gave up, I think, in season 2.
Oh, it gets better, I promise. But yes,
Okay.
it's a guilty pleasure of mine.
Okay. If you had a podcast, who is the first person that you would invite on the show?
David
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be someone within the industry.
Yeah, David Attenborough for sure.
Okay. Nice, nice. 3 books that you would recommend to our listeners.
Ooh, I'm reading How to Kill Your Family. That's really good. Really enjoying that. I read Hope by Niall Harbison. He rescues street dogs in Thailand, and that was really heart-wrenching but lovely. And then I think The Chimp Paradox. That one's really good. That one actually relates to the industry a bit more as well.
What is one superpower that you would like to have?
To fly. It's always been to fly.
Nice. One thing that you're tired of explaining to your boss or your client. ROI calculations. They're just calculations, they're just our best estimates, and everyone always wants to see them on the bottom line, and we can't control for all the outside factors. So I get that that's a bit of a tiresome conversation for me. Got it. One goal or dream that you would like to achieve in the next 3 years.
There's too many. The next 3 years, you say?
Yeah.
I'd like to run a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea if my knees are capable of it, so we'll see.
So is that like your long-term plan within the 3 years to run a marathon? And also, like, what's the length of the marathon? Forgive me if I'm like, forgive my ignorance here.
The marathon is 26.2 miles,
Okay.
but only 1% of the population will run one in their lifetime. And I just feel like that's a really cool stat to be part of. So I really wish to run one, but I have like historical knee problems. But I would do something like Amsterdam's because it's really flat, or like London's because you get to see different scenes. So yeah, I'd have to train for quite some time, but not for 3 years, I hope.
Nice. Wonderful. I see that fitness is an important aspect of your life, Steph. So that's quite lovely. And I'm so inspired right now. You have no idea. Like right after this, I'm gonna go rush to the gym. I already have a gym membership that I do not use. So I think it's time to put that to use.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'm to any fitness questions as well. I know I'm always on LinkedIn telling people message me about experimentation, but if you have any fitness questions as well, like hit me up. I'm always down to talk about weightlifting or running or
Well, we're connected on LinkedIn, so do expect a few messages from me there.
Yeah, cool.
Anyways, Steph, well, that is everything that I wanted to discuss with you as part of this Women in CRO podcast. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us. The conversation was so insightful. I mean, it was to me, and I know that it will be to our listeners as well.
Yeah, will do. Thanks so much. It's been really, really nice chat.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, Steph. Bye.
Thank you.
All the
Bye.
best.